Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. Hope everyone is having a great day. Thanks so much for joining us. People are streaming in, so we will give it another moment or so. We are so grateful to have you here. There is really robust interest in this webinar and this funding opportunity, and there is no better way to be spending my afternoon than here with you all to talk about safe streets and roads for all. We'll give it about 30 more seconds and then we'll dive in. Do you want to take a moment, introduce yourself in the chat, let us know your name, where you're from, and have you applied for Safe Streets and Roads for All before? Is this your first rodeo, or are you coming back for another bite at the apple? All right, let's jump in. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. The countdown is on. 2025 Safe Streets and Roads for All funding is open. My name is Marisa Jones, and I am the Managing Director of Policy and Partnerships at Safe Routes Partnership. We are a fully remote national nonprofit, and I am based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where it is an absolutely beautiful blue sky day. The Safe Routes Partnership is a national nonprofit organization that got our start 20 years ago, creating the federal Safe Routes to School program. We quickly learned that what works for moving kids on foot and on bike to and from school works for moving people of all ages throughout their communities to all kinds of important community destinations. Today, we work to make walking and bicycling safe, convenient, and fun for everyone. We do that in a number of ways, including lobbying Congress for funding and policy that supports walking, bicycling, and safe routes to school, providing capacity building support to state departments of transportation, working with state and local champions for walking, bicycling, and safe routes to school. We develop free, publicly available fact sheets and toolkits. We host webinars, convenings, and conferences for professional development of the safe routes to school and active transportation fields. And we offer consulting services in the realms of policy, planning, and program support for safe routes to school and walking and bicycling more generally. On today's webinar, we are going to cover the following agenda. We're going to go over what the Safe Streets and Roads for All opportunity is. We'll address who can apply, what they can apply for, and we are really critically going to apply what is different this year from prior years. And the question that I'm sure is on many of your minds, how do current events affect this year's opportunity? And then we are going to round this out with clear instructions on how to apply, as well as support that's available for applicants. And teaser, there is a really, really exciting resource that our team has put together for you that we will share at the end of the webinar. So make sure you stay tuned. So why are we hosting this webinar? We were just chatting as a team before opening the webinar and saying, we put this out before the notice of funding opportunity was even released. And the reason that we're doing that and the reason we're hosting this webinar is because this year, the Safe Streets for All application is a sprint. With only 90 days from the opening, from when it was posted on grants.gov to when it is due, we want to make sure communities know about the opportunity, know how to apply, and can avail themselves of resources and support. Over the past 3 years, we have seen how transformational this funding can be for communities. Last year, we trained over 1,000 community leaders to pursue Safe Streets and Roads for All funding. And we witnessed across the country last year alone, over $260 million was awarded in SS4A funding for planning and implementation of safe routes to school strategies. So whether you've applied in the past or if this is your first bite at the apple, we are here at the Safe Routes Partnership to help you be successful in winning funds this year. So let's dive into the opportunity. Because we're in the 4th year of Safe Streets and Roads for All, I'm going to run through this fairly quickly, but we're going to drop a link in the chat for more in-depth resources to familiarize yourself with Safe Streets and Roads for All, to give you dozens of potential project ideas. So we'll put that in the chat for you. And actually, I'm sorry, I should take a moment to say, we are committed to leaving ample time for questions and answers. We just ask that you please put your Q&A, your questions, into the Q&A box rather than the chat. When they're in the chat, it rolls through really quickly. We can't keep track of them. So please put them in the Q&A box so that we can really easily see the questions that you have. Whoopsies. All right, so, oh my, sorry, folks. All right, so I'm going to ask one broad question, and then I want to invite you all to take a moment to read the questions posted on this screen. I want you to think about whether your community is interested in either the question that I ask verbally or any of the questions on the screen. So, is your community interested in preventing death and serious injuries on your roadways, including for people walking and bicycling? If you answered yes to that or any of the questions on the screen, then Safe Streets and Roads for All is for you. It is for your community. In preparing for this webinar, we scanned through the registration list and noticed that we have people from schools, consulting firms, metropolitan planning organizations, state departments of transportation, municipalities, counties, and a number of other types of entities. So we've tried to tailor the material accordingly, but again, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box so we can make sure that we are providing as much support to you and your community for these funds. All right, so fast facts, Safe Streets and Roads for All. I hope that you all will forgive me for using the acronym SS4A throughout this webinar, but it's much quicker than saying Safe Streets and Roads for All. But so the acronym is SS4A. So let's run through what some of the fast facts on this program are. Safe Street SS4A is a federal grant program run by the US Department of Transportation. The simplest way of explaining it is that it's money for cities, towns, counties, and regions to reduce roadway fatalities through planning and through building things. This is the 4th year of SS4A, and there is $1 billion available. Next year is the last year of the program unless Congress reauthorizes it, which that's a different webinar topic. We'll talk about that another day. But the critical thing to know is that this funding opportunity is open currently, and it's due, your application is due on June 26th. Other things to know, this is as simple as federal funding opportunities get. If you apply for a planning grant under $1 million, we're looking at a 2-page narrative. And this is also unique because it is one of the federal funding opportunities where you have the highest likelihood of success. Don't just take my word for it. In the first 2 years of this program, every eligible applicant with a complete submission was awarded funding. So your chances of success have never been better. What can we learn from the first 3 years of SS4A? In the top right corner, there is a map of all the communities that have gotten SS4A funding. And I put a bunch of stats on the left-hand side. But what I really want to do is zoom out and share, here's what we've learned from the first 3 years of success of SS4A. The first is that there is an incredibly high likelihood of success for applicants. The second thing, it is not just for big cities. About half of the recipients of SS4A grants in the first 3 years were rural communities. It's also not just for the cities who are frequent flyers and know how to win that federal money. Again, about half of the recipients of SS4A funds are communities that it's their first time getting funding directly from USDOT. And when I look at this all together, The biggest takeaway is that this funding is for you. This funding is for your community. Whatever your circumstance, whatever your size, whatever your situation, SS4A is for your community. So, who can apply and for what? This is the big question. So on the screen, you'll see the technical language of who can apply as set out by law and the notice of funding opportunity. But most simply, if you are a unit of government below the state level, you can apply. For my nonprofit friends, and I know there are many of you on this call, unfortunately, as nonprofits, we are not eligible to apply, but nonprofits can be sub-awarded funds. So for any of the nonprofits on this call, go out and find an eligible applicant to partner with. The other thing that I want to point out here is that if you have gotten funding before, you can ask for more. You are eligible to apply again. So what can you do with this money? Loosely, it goes into two buckets. And don't worry, we're going to go into all the details. But implementation is 60% of the money. So 60% of that $1 billion is going to implementation. And when we think about implementation, we're talking about building physical infrastructure, but we're also talking about executing strategies that are either programmatic or operational in nature. And so this is something that I just want to flag for folks. Like, yes, it is mostly building things. It is deploying traffic calming measures. It is building sidewalks, but it could also be things like training bus operators on making sure they're trained on where people walking and bicycling are, for example. So there are great examples of implementation funding. There's one from Billings, Montana, that got implementation SS4A funds to implement safety countermeasures at 11 intersections and 6 corridors in support of a Safe Routes to School initiative. So that's really exciting. And then the other 40% is spent on planning. So there are different opportunities within planning, and planning constitutes 40% of that $1 billion. And this ranges anywhere from your community is that square one. You want to identify traffic safety concerns and articulate a vision to reducing and lowering and eliminating those traffic fatalities. All the way through, our community's been really working on a plan, but actually, like, we don't have great community buy-in. So we want to try out a couple of strategies to get community support and also test out whether or not these strategies are working to improve safety so that we can finalize our plan. So within planning, I mentioned that there are these different buckets. So the first bucket is just the general developing an action plan. And truly, this is step one. If your community doesn't have a comprehensive safety action plan, or it's not covered by a community or a region with a comprehensive safety action plan, this is your opportunity. This is your starting point. Comprehensive safety action plans, on the next slide, I'll talk about what the elements are as defined by USDOT. But also just want to flag that your community might not call it a comprehensive safety action plan. You might call it a tribal transportation safety plan. Commonly, they're referred to as Vision Zero plans. But this is really the foundation of safe streets and roads for all. Without this, you cannot apply for the other kinds of funding available. So what are those elements of a comprehensive safety action plan? Here are the 7 elements. You must include a commitment to zero traffic deaths. There must be a planning committee involved. You must conduct a safety analysis. Importantly and interestingly, engagement with stakeholders is a critical part of the comprehensive safety action plan. It must lay out both policy and process changes. You have to get down to the project and strategy selection level. And you must include a process for measuring progress and reporting out to stakeholders. The second kind of grant within planning is supplemental planning. Oh, I'm sorry. One other thing I should say about the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, really critical. is that it must be geography wide and it must be multimodal in nature. All right, so the second kind is a supplemental plan. So while the action plan has to be geography wide and multimodal in nature, supplemental planning can be more focused. And so this can be, the way that I think about this is maybe you did this geography citywide plan, but you know what? Actually, you really want to understand like where are crashes involving older adults happening, or where are kids being involved in crashes, or maybe you have a couple of corridors that you really want to dive in on, or this is perhaps where you do want to say, you know, we really want to understand challenges for people walking, pedestrians, and focus in on one mode, a place, or a particular geography within your city. So an example, I have to talk about safe routes to school. This is a great opportunity for safe routes to school plans, and we'll talk about this a little bit more with aligning with this US DOT priorities. But safe routes to school plans are completely eligible for supplemental planning, and we highly recommend considering applying for that with supplemental planning. So one example of that is sort of close to me in Philadelphia. The city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania got SS4A funding to conduct a supplemental Safe Routes to School safety plan to analyze transportation safety around 11 schools in their district. So the third kind of grant opportunity within planning are demonstration projects. And so this is really about testing and evaluating strategies. So again, maybe this is all brand new to your community and people are just really stuck on like, oh my God, my parking, or like, I just want to drive as fast as I can everywhere. And you really want to make sure that you're getting buy-in from your community rather than this being a challenging dynamic. And so demonstration projects can be an opportunity to really try things out, get community input and feedback, measure if the strategies that you're contemplating for your plan are really going to have their intended safety impacts. Demonstration projects could be for you. And so an example from a prior year of SS4A was in Knoxville, Tennessee, where they are conducting a Safe Routes to School trial with demonstrating improved crosswalks at 5 locations. And then they are evaluating the safety impacts and perception of those improved crosswalks. Again, I know we have a lot of people on this webinar who are not yet in the Safe Routes to School community. So you can use this for things beyond Safe Routes to School, but I also just want to make sure that I'm elevating for our Safe Routes to School friends. And for those of you interested in learning more about Safe Routes to School, this is a great opportunity to try some Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure strategies, paying walking school bus leaders, for example. And we dropped a link in the chat already, but we did a whole webinar specifically on Safe Routes to School and SS4A, and we have honestly dozens of really creative, cool ideas of what you can do with all the different funding, the grant opportunities for Safe Routes to School. So we'll make sure that we re-elevate that for you. So some of the key points here, and we're going to talk about this more when we talk about changes from last year and moving forward this year. But key things are that this must be temporary, and that's a change from last year. And then critically, you have to connect a demonstration project to your planning process, which that's not new. And then you have to perform an evaluation. So you have to be measuring the impact on safety. So implementation, comprehensive safety action planning, supplemental planning, demonstration projects. So we tried to put this information out here in a couple of different ways because there are sort of rules about who can apply for what. And as I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, it all comes back to whether or not you have an eligible comprehensive safety action plan that meets those 7 criteria. If your community or a community that encompasses you, so like you're a city within a county that has a plan, then you can apply for these other 3 types of funding. But if you don't have an action plan, if you're not covered by an action plan, that is your option. And then for my flowchart lovers out there, I am a visual learner. Here is another way of looking at that information. Okay, so now we're getting into the content that most of you are likely here for. What is different from prior years, and how do current events shape this opportunity? So you might be wondering, why are things different? This is year 4 of 5 of a 5-year program. We just had this for 3 years. Why is it different at all? Well, SS4A is what's called a discretionary grant. So when the federal government gives money for transportation projects, some of it goes to the state DOTs through a formula, and the state departments of transportation make decisions. And other funding goes to the US Department of Transportation to compete out. And those are called discretionary grants. They are administered by the executive branch through US DOT, and therefore they reflect the current administration's priorities. So as we all know, there was a change in presidential administrations between last year, year 3 of SS4A, and this year. So accordingly, there are changes to the SS4A program. I want to be clear that some of the elements of the program are set by law, and those did not change, but others, the administration has more discretion over. So that's why we're talking about changes to this program at all. All right, so what is new and different? Let's start with the most simple, logistics. Look, I am not going to sugarcoat it. As I said earlier, this is a sprint. Unlike prior years where there were multiple deadlines, this year there is one deadline, and it's June 26th. It is a 90-day period from when this opened the last Friday in March. So this is the time, do not delay. But as I mentioned earlier, as far as federal funding opportunities go, this is as simple as it gets. So please do not let the short deadline scare you. Let it motivate you. Okay, other changes on the logistics front. The maximum award for planning grants and demonstration grants is down from 10 million to 5 million. Under the prior administration, comprehensive safety action plans had 8 required elements. Under this administration, there are 7. Equity was removed under this administration. Another change, I alluded to this when I talked about demonstration grants. Under the prior administration, the demonstration grants did not need to be removed if they were shown to be improving safety. This NOFO, this Notice of Funding Opportunity, clearly states that demonstration projects must be finite trial periods. So when you are writing your application, it needs to be time bound. You need to say, like, we're going to do this on X, Y, and Z days over this many months, and then we will take it out. So that's a change. And then something else is that NEPA and pre-construction design costs. So I'm sorry, this is for implementation. These can count towards your match, even if you have already incurred them, if you state that in your application. And that is unusual because usually with federal transportation funding, you can't count things you've already spent money on as match. But if you have already incurred costs, but you write about that in your application, you can count it towards match. So that's pretty in the weeds, but I know some of you on this webinar are the in the weeds people, so I want to make sure that you get the in the weeds info that you are here for. Okay, next, on the eligibility front, this has been back and forth over the years. This year, the US Department of Transportation is willing to verify the eligibility of your comprehensive safety action plan if you email them by May 9th. And so here, they're really trying to make sure that if you are trying to apply for implementation funding, you want to build something, that the plan that you're saying you're implementing from counts and meets, there's 7 criteria. So if you are curious about whether or not you're eligible to apply for implementation, supplemental, or demo, and you want to email them by the 9th, you can, May 9th. The other thing is there is a self-certification worksheet, but if you have questions, you can do that. So something else that's new, you can use up to 3 plans to meet those 7 components of an action plan. So perhaps you have a vision 0 plan. I mean, maybe you just need to braid together a couple of plans to meet the 7 criteria. That is different. Okay, others. Bear with me here for a second. If you don't have an action plan, but you are covered by an action plan that specifically highlights corridors or projects or strategies in your community, you can apply for implementation funding to build those. So an example here is, say there's a county-wide comprehensive safety action plan, and they say, we really need to uh, improve crosswalks on Main Street in your community, in Community A. Community A doesn't have a plan, but they could still apply for implementation funding because there is an action plan with specific projects and strategies covering their community. So that's something to point out. Okay, other things that are new. Here, like if you haven't been paying attention, maybe tune back in here for like a couple of seconds and slides. So other things that are new and different this year. So let's talk about prioritization. How are projects being selected or awards being selected and prioritized? So the first thing is, again, this is a discretionary program. It's governed by the executive branch. So any of the Biden-Harris administration executive orders that governed the first 3 years of this program are out. So that's things like Justice 40, for example. That is out. Also things focused on green, climate change, social justice, those that really aligned clearly with the Biden administration executive orders, those are not being prioritized. And then things that are in. So Secretary Duffy of the US DOT on his, second day in the Post issued a memo on how the Trump administration is prioritizing project selection for discretionary grants. And so that memo applies to project selection. And so some of the things that I want to pull out here from the memo that's linked, you're welcome to read it yourself. But some of the things that I want to point out here are that memo highlighted a focus on supporting daily transportation needs for families. It focused on using evidence-based strategies, and it focused on projects with a positive economic return on investment. So I alluded earlier to like, oh, Safe Routes to School actually like can fit really well within this. And one of the reasons we're actively promoting applying for Safe Routes to School plans through supplemental planning is because they actually align with all of those things. Safe Routes to School supports daily transportation needs for families. There's a robust evidence base that it reduces traffic crashes and fatalities. And multiple economic analyses show that for every dollar invested in Safe Routes to School, there's a $4.40 health and safety benefit. Okay, so other things within prioritization. Something that is the same is that last year, round 3, there was an emphasis on communities with high fatality rates, 17.5 out of 100,000, and also communities that have not received SS4A funds. Those are still being prioritized. And then, well, I mentioned earlier, Justice 40 was something that the Biden administration prioritized. This year, the indicator for underserved census tracts and getting community funding to communities that can benefit most from it is the area of persistent poverty. Okay, so other things to focus on and make abundantly clear in your narrative. You have to show coordination with other plans in your same geography. So say you live within an urbanized area and your metropolitan planning organization, your MPO, has a comprehensive safety action plan, you have to have a letter of support saying, here's how our supplemental plan is going to feed into their action plan. If you don't have that, your application is not going to be competitive. And so that's something that if you're on today's webinar and you live somewhere where you're applying for supplemental or demo because you're covered by an action plan, please reach out to the entity that has the safety action plan to make sure you can talk about how to coordinate. and they're going to need to write, the entity with the action plan is going to need to write a letter of support. Another thing that there is a big focus on in this year's NOFO here's the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, is making sure that if you are applying for supplemental or demonstration projects, that you are not doing that in a bubble, that you are doing that in a way that informs the development or updates to an action plan. Sorry. Okay, other things, I talked about this earlier. The foundation of this, the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, again, I'll say it a million times, it has to cover your whole geography and it has to be multimodal in nature. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about current events, but the best advice that I can give you on shaping the way you talk about what you're going to do is to know your audience. So we have talked about this. The Trump administration, USDOT is reviewing and selecting the applications. When you are contemplating how you're going to write about what you want to do, keep that in mind. What are their goals and their priorities, and how are you demonstrating that the project that you are pursuing reduces overall roadway injuries and fatalities and ties into some of these prioritizations that I have in this left box in Secretary Duffy's memo. And then crystal clear, because I know we have a lot of people on this call who love walking and biking, myself included. This is not a mode shift project. Even though there's research that talks about how more people walking and biking improves safety, at the end of the day, this is not about getting people out of cars and onto bikes and public transit and walking. It is about using evidence-based strategies for reducing roadway fatalities. So just have that in mind as you're writing. Like, trust me, I'm all about mode shift, and that is not the frame that I would suggest that you use in writing your narrative. Oh, it looks like I put this slide in here twice. Okay. So one of the things that I realized that I didn't put in the first one, something else that's different, there's a specific line in the Notice of Funding Opportunity that says that if you are proposing to reduce travel lanes, that probably will not be smiled upon under this administration. So that is new. So just be aware of that. Everything else I think was on my prior slide. Okay, so the next topic that you're probably very interested in, how do current events affect this opportunity? I know that we have a range of people on this call because, again, I looked at who registered, everything from people who I know are following every single piece of news about federal transportation funding to everyday residents of this country. And I want to say you are all welcome here. Happy to have you all. But for anybody who has heard about funds being frozen, I just want to say for this program, they are not technically frozen. They're not like stopped without a plan to move them forward, but they are definitely backlogged and they are being reviewed, if not have already been reviewed. There was a March 11th internal memo guiding USDOT to review any SS4A awards that didn't have grant agreements, so we're not under contract, to make sure that they align with this administration's priorities and to revise the scope if possible. I want to be really clear that this is a moving target. There is a lot shifting, and this is not something that is happening in the public sphere. So I'm sharing this to the extent that this provides insight on what this administration is looking to see if they can cut out of prior SS4A grants. So I put some of the language from that internal memo here. They're looking to see if they can cut back on project activities like equity analysis, green infrastructure, bicycle infrastructure, EV and or EV charging, and if the purpose is primary project benefits include equity or climate. And so I share this just so that, again, you are aware of what this administration is both looking for and not looking for. And one of the things that I want to be really clear on is, as I mentioned earlier, there's both discretion. So what does this administration prioritize and how are they reflecting their goals and values? But then there's also the law. And so I put a hyperlink here for anybody who, you just want a little bedtime reading and you want to go back to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that created this program. If you click on that link, go to page 387, you can see that this program, as far as federal transportation programs go, it's fairly prescriptive. And one of the things is that Congress included language that specifically required consideration of safety concerns for people walking, bicycling, transit users in implementation and planning. And so even though we saw that memo that focused on bike infrastructure, we see a conflict with what is in statute. So I'm just laying this out there to both say, be aware, but also the law says something else. And so perhaps thinking about how supporting safe places for people to walk in, or to bike, can be part of your overall project, but perhaps not the only focus. So again, so I mentioned we're in this shift, that we're in an active shift from one administration to the other. Things are changing, and yet we are still confident that people should and communities should apply for this funding. And why? Again, I mentioned the law governing this program is fairly prescriptive and includes language specifically focused on all road users and specifically articulates the road users that I have laid out here. The second thing that gives me confidence is that this program is very popular among elected officials. And my colleagues are on Capitol Hill quite frequently, talking with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle in both the House and the Senate. And I have yet to go into an office of a member of Congress who works on transportation issues who does not like this program. We regularly hear, again, from both sides of the aisle, oh my gosh, my constituents love this program. This is bringing so much funding to our community. So that gives us confidence. I'm just going to restate this, right, with your audience in mind. And then finally, we have a roadway safety crisis in this country. And this is the first time that we have a federal transportation program specifically aimed at getting money to below the state level, specifically to focus on reducing roadway fatalities. We have this year and we have next year. Collectively, we cannot afford not to apply for this funding. In terms of writing with your audience in mind, I also just want to be clear. I know, again, from the registration list that many of you are committed to ideals and values and goals that might feel in conflict with this administration. And I want to be clear that I'm not encouraging you to compromise on those values. I'm encouraging you to write in a way that nests the goals that you are working toward within this administration's goals. And I think that everyone on this call is a creative and persuasive writer. And I'm confident that you can still reach your community connectivity and safety goals without compromising on what it is you're trying to do. Okay, last thing before we get to questions. So how do we apply and what support is available for applicants? Tried to put this all here. On the logistics front, read the notice of funding opportunity. It's 75 pages long. It's a little dry, but it's very informative. And honestly, it holds your hand pretty well through exactly what you need to do. Other key steps, you need to register for a unique entity identifier on sam.gov. They say it can take up to 30 days, so get cracking on that now. Then also register on valid eval for the type of grant you are pursuing. Coordination, that's another thing that you can get a jump start on today. Gather those potential partners. As I mentioned earlier, community and stakeholder engagement is a big part of this process. Make sure that you have those partners at the table. Get letters of support from them. You really need to demonstrate coordination, and drafting letters of support for your partners to complete makes it so much more likely that they are going to give you those letters of support. And to be clear, the letters of support need to be all put in together as one packet for the NOFO. So the budget, there is a 20% local match required. Again, this is a unique program. It doesn't need to be cash match. It can be in kind. So that is everything from like space, you're getting space from the local rec center or volunteers, or quantifying the value of staff time who are working on this project. Okay, you've got crossing guards. What is the value of their time and how do you put that towards your match? And then gathering data. There are some very specific data points that this program asks you for, or your application asks you for. You need to make sure you can get that all together. But stay tuned, we've got something for you. Okay, other tips for a compelling application. I'm sorry if some of this is redundant. But most importantly, you need to focus on the safety impact. Answer the question, how is this going to reduce traffic injuries and fatalities? You need to quantify the safety challenges. I put one link in here, but there are some specific data points that you need to be able to answer. And again, we're going to walk you through exactly what you need to do. Make sure that you are aligning with USDOT priorities. So we already talked about some of these. One that I want to also elevate is demonstrate readiness to hit the ground running. That's one of the things that I've been hearing, when Secretary Duffy is on the Hill talking to members of Congress about why things are being reviewed or delayed. That's one of the things I hear him talking about. Like, we don't really think that folks are actually ready to hit the ground running. So make sure you're able to do that. And then other general things, follow the NOFO suggested outline. Like if you're applying for an implementation grant, page 38 will tell you, here's how we suggest you structure your application. So there are some just really tangible and specific things to do. And if I haven't said this enough, write with your grant review audience in mind. Okay, so I know that we have people on this webinar who are not eligible applicants. So happy to have you here. You totally have a role in this. For our state DOT friends, a role that you can play is writing a letter of support if a community is applying for implementation or applying for SS4A grant on a road that the state owns, but that goes through their jurisdiction. And this is like the prime example is like, oh, Main Street is also a state highway. So that is something that would be very helpful if a community asks you for that. Nonprofits, you play a great role in encouraging jurisdictions to apply. Make sure they know how easy it is to apply, that you want them to apply, and offer ideas for the role that you can play. You could support community engagement. You could help develop messages. Many of you on this call already do Safe Routes to School programming. You could do that if that's what they're applying for supplemental or demo grants for. And then members of the general public, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for knowing what SS4A is and having some interest in this. Honestly, one of the things that I love most about SS4A is that it has really helped capture the imagination of communities across the country on what if we designed our streets and roads to be safer. And the role that you play as unattached members of the general public is really encouraging your jurisdictions to apply. Send them to our resources, send them to USDOT's resources. Make sure they know that you as a constituent want them to apply. I'm not going to run through these, but I just put some ideas in here for the different kinds of grants. Put links to videos that USDOT created on prior SS4A grants. And then what I really want you to focus on too is if you want other ideas, look at past awardees. Look at what they applied for. Look at how much money they got and get inspired. You can just scan through it or like Maybe you have a peer city that you're like, oh, what are they doing? What did they ask for? You don't have to come up with everything out of thin air. Okay, then support for applying. I am very excited to share this with you. So first off, we have some great resources that were around the last couple of years. So the USDOT website, there's a lot of great info on there. I'm also going to say there's a lot of info that's not yet updated for 2025. So clearly that is your source of truth and like 100% accurate info. It just might not be updated. So take that with a grain of salt. Local Infrastructure Hub put together SS4A bootcamp modules. Again, it's not updated for 2025, but there's really good content on there. And then there's nothing like being able to look at what somebody else submitted and got funded for. So Local Infrastructure Hub also put on their sample winning applications. So go ahead and check those out. I mentioned, we put in the chat, we had a webinar for Safe Streets for All ideas specific to safe routes to school. Watch the webinar, watch it on 2 times fast, or just look at the slide deck. And now what I am so excited for you to share with you, because our team is so amazing and put this together so quickly. So our team put together a rapid response toolkit to hold your hand through applying for SS4A. So what is in this toolkit? There's evidence, talking points, and research to justify safe routes to school and active transportation inclusion within SS4A and to align them with current USDOT priorities. So for example, we know USDOT wants strategies that have a positive economic return on investment. I already told you there's research on that. We put it all out there for you, organized by what DOT is saying it wants and what the evidence says. So make sure you check that out. We also have quick links for data points. So this is one of those things that in 2024, it was all on the USDOT website. It's not yet on the USDOT website. This is like, how do you calculate the average annual fatality rate? How do you do fatality counts? So we went through and made sure you have quick links for exactly how to get the data points. No guesswork needed. So we talked about showing readiness. This year, USDOT wants to see timelines for demonstration activities. So we created sample timelines for you. To be clear, I'm not suggesting you copy and paste our timelines, but we know that sometimes it's helpful to have a starting point so that you can see what might work. And these are based on projects that we have done over the years. So please check that out. We have it for quick builds. We have it for safe routes to school non-infrastructure. Other things, guidance on map creation. You have to provide 2 kinds of maps as part of your application. If you don't have access to ArcGIS for a shapefile, the other option is a KML. Don't know what a KML is? Well, we will walk you through exactly what it is and how to include one in your application. And then finally, budgets. We have sample budgets for safe routes to school, for metropolitan planning organizations, for demonstration projects. And this is because our team went through and analyzed what funding levels were for these different kinds of projects. So this is this bottom right link, saferoutespartnership.org, resources blog. Please check it out. I'm sorry it's not beautifully laid out. We were working really quickly, but the information is in there. It is going to be helpful for you. Again, this is a sprint and we want to help you be successful. And the other thing that we can offer is that we are available for one-on-one quick chats. I see a lot of questions already in the chat box. We can't answer community-specific questions on this webinar, but our amazing team is available if you want to schedule some time with them to ask your community-specific question. Before we turn to questions, we're having a summit in October. You all should come. It's virtual. It's going to be fabulous. And here's information on how to stay in touch with our organization. And with that, I am going to open the Q&A where there are a lot of questions. All right. Somebody's asking if you need to have an adopted Vision Zero policy to be eligible for funding. So the answer is no. If you don't have a comprehensive safety action plan, or if you don't have a Vision Zero policy, no problem. You could apply for a to develop a comprehensive safety action plan. And as part of that, you're having an elected official's commitment to reducing overall roadway fatalities. And then overall, the plan needs to be adopted by the governing body. But a Vision Zero policy is not a prereq. Okay, somebody is asking, are safe routes programs better applied for under implementation or planning and demo? So if you want to pilot a Safe Routes to School program, so say you don't have walking school buses, but you know that they improve attendance and safety, so you want to pilot paying walking school bus leaders, you could do that under a demonstration grant. Or maybe your community has already identified, like, here are our safety concerns. We want to put in high visibility crosswalks, RFEs or hawk signals, then you could apply for implementation funding. And this also brings me to another point, which is that you can bundle together application types. So maybe you want to implement something, but you also want to pilot something. So say you want to implement your Safe Routes to School infrastructure, but you've never done the non-infrastructure side. So you could say, we're going to implement this construction and we want to pilot and test something new. All right, next, would a Safe Routes to School program with no action plan qualify to apply? Our program is solely educational based. So actually, this is a great opportunity. Again, you have to be an eligible applicant. So if you are a school district that is a political subdivision of a state, or you're run through a city, or depending on your eligible applicant, then you can apply. And this would be a great opportunity to do a more comprehensive Safe Routes to School action plan that really assesses the infrastructure needs and the non-infrastructure opportunities. Again, the critical thing is that if you're going to apply for just a Safe Routes to School action plan, you either have to have or have to be covered by a comprehensive safety action plan. But great opportunity. All right, if awarded, how long is the duration of the grant? 5 years, but the notice of funding opportunity says, especially for demonstration grants, they want to see your work on the ground within 18 months. Somebody is asking, can a council of governments apply? Yes. If you are a political subdivision of the state, yes. Sorry, do you have to have a planning grant prior to the implementation grant? So implementation grants, you are implementing projects and strategies from the plan. So yes, in short, you have to have a plan that meets those 7 criteria, or you can bundle together 3 plans that meet those 7 criteria. Okay, somebody's asking, can you give a general overview of bundling 2 or more projects in the same application? How do we separate data, budgets, outcomes? Okay, so if you are applying, basically, I'm sorry to do this, but I might send you to the notice of funding opportunity where it will clearly walk you through that. But basically, they have like an itemized budget where you put in there, like it's on page 33 of the NOFO if you want to look at the sample itemized budget. But because bundling is totally permissible and has happened in the prior 3 rounds, there is a pretty clear outline and budget layout for that. Okay, this is a great question. Sorry, they're all great questions. Can an NPO use a state safety plan instead of county or its own plan? So that is not permitted. You cannot use a state strategic highway safety plan instead of your own plan. This money is all intended to go below the state level. So no SHSP as the eligible. I lost my train of thought. Okay. Can a school district and DOT in the same city apply? Excellent question. Sorry, there's so much. It's hard to get it all into 1 hour. So in the same jurisdiction, there can only be 1 applicant. But as we've talked about, you could bundle together ideas. But say I live in the city of Metropolis and 3 different school districts and I don't know, other transit agency all want to apply? No, we have to bundle it into one application per eligible applicant. Okay, another question. Is there a list of existing safety action plans that show which areas are covered? Yes, there is. We can either drop that in the chat if somebody on our team can drop the list of awarded projects from the USDOT website. Otherwise, we can make sure we put that in our follow-up. But if you go to the USDOT SS4A website, oh, you know what? It's on the slide that had the map. There's a link there. So we'll make sure you get the slides and it's on there. But great idea. Go through and see if you are covered by one. Okay, double checking. Education part can also be under implementation. So yes, implementation in this notice of funding opportunity, and I'll admit this is new to me. I'm not saying it's new from prior years, but I didn't catch this in prior years. They specifically say it doesn't only have to be construction. Okay, question from somebody who's waiting for their grant agreement from a prior year. Should they still apply? Yes. If you have more ideas of what you want to do with this money, absolutely apply for more, even while you're waiting for your grant agreement. Okay, can we apply without a comprehensive safety action plan? If you don't have a comprehensive safety action plan, you can apply for funding to develop a comprehensive safety action plan. Are state universities eligible to apply for the grant? If you yes, as long as you are a political subdivision of a state. But the question I was just answering is from somebody who I know to be a state university who has gotten this grant, and many state universities have gotten the grant, but just make sure that your state considers you a political subdivision of the law of the state. Sorry. Is there a minimum and maximum? Sorry, folks, I'm trying to get to as many of these as possible. The minimum planning grant is $100,000. The maximum planning grant is $5 million. I don't have the implementation grant numbers off the top of my head. Let's see. For cash match, are there restrictions on what is eligible? Yes. So federal funds are generally not allowed to be used as match with certain caveats. For example, if you are a tribal community and you want to use the tribal transportation program, you can use that, but generally you cannot use federal funds as a match. I'm so sorry. Is this funding annual? Yeah, so this is $1 billion a year from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 26. So this is authorized through 2026. When we say 2 more years of funding, does this mean FY 25 and 26? Yes. This year and 2026 are the 2 years of funding that remain. But seriously, please don't delay. Apply now. Okay. For clarification, okay, somebody's asking, can state governments apply? No, but local governments or subdivisions of a state can apply, correct? Community-based nonprofits cannot be the lead applicants. Okay, somebody's asking what I mean by geography-wide. So if you are applying for a comprehensive safety action plan, geography-wide means the whole geography of the applicant. So like I live in the city of Philadelphia, the comprehensive safety action plan has to cover the whole city of Philadelphia. All right, somebody's saying last year there were nearly 10 times more planning and demo grants awarded compared to implementation grants. That trend expected to continue with the new administration? Yes. So this is governed by law. So by law, 60% of the funds go to implementation and 40% go to planning. It costs a lot more to build infrastructure than to develop plans. So honestly, you have really good odds of getting the planning grants. The implementation grants are very competitive. Would I recommend not having a road diet as a demonstration project? You know, when I look at the notice of funding opportunity and I specifically see something in there about like not reducing travel lanes, like that would probably give me pause personally. But the other thing is, we talk about this in that resource sheet that we share. Anytime you can point to what you are suggesting as a Federal Highway Administration proven safety countermeasure for bicyclists and pedestrians, I would definitely recommend doing that. Is the match required for implementation only? No, it's required for all grants. And we are at time. I'm so sorry. There are so many more questions that we didn't get to, but I am committed to looking at all of these and summarizing them high level in a blog post. Thank you for being here. Again, I really want to just encourage everybody to check out that resource that our amazing team put together that walks you through how to apply, talking points, how to create a map, how to get all the data that you need, sample budgets, sample timelines. They put this together to help each and every one of you and your communities be successful. Thank you all so much for being here. Please consider applying for Safe Streets for All. It is so important that we are planning for and implementing strategies and projects that improve roadway safety for kids and people of all ages. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day.